clogged mempool of like 500 sats per VByte. Like, what is the solution to that long term if this kind of gas war continues or even accelerates?
I'm against rules that stop experimentation, but at the same time, the mempool being so clogged is eventually we're going to get to this level where you got to pay these fees. I agree, we're going to get there, but you can't just jack these fees up to this level and expect to just say, this is the new norm, this is what people are going to be paying, and sell it to people. Because I'm used to paying 28 cents to sell my, send a couple hundred rare Pepe, cards around. So when I'm having to pay $15, I realize that's where we're going eventually. But one project sucking all the air out of the space and stifling innovation and not allowing people to experiment is not good for the ecosystem at all. I think the core devs are going to put a stop to it by removing the taproot discount or somehow, stopping ordinals, restricting non-standard transactions.
Ooh, we're in for a special one today. Man, I've actually been trying to have this conversation for quite some time, so more than honored to be able to host JDOG, one of the XCHAIN legends, the early Counterparty OGs out here. This man has been just running XCHAIN for, kid you not, what is it, a few years now, huh?
Yeah, about 9 years, yeah, a while.
Just a few. Yeah. The man, the myth, the legend, JDOG has been in full support of the Counterparty and DogeParty, the back end for quite some time. He's been in the Pepe community for a while. He's a man where his name gets thrown all around a lot whenever they're talking about respected OGs and people who know the history. But this man's always lurking in the background. So I asked him politely to come on the show and so we could learn a little bit about him and kind of the crazy stuff that he does. So, Jeremy, thank you for coming on, bro.
Of course. I'm happy to be here.
Really, really appreciate it. So, of course, as I mentioned, whenever rare Pepes gets thrown up or like the big supporters or people who are big in the Counterparty scene, JDOG, the name has always been thrown around. And we've seen some of your tweets, right? The one that was mentioned before recording was you just kind of rebooting XCHAIN and adding some updates and everything like that. But let's start a little bit before that, or at least to where we can. Tell us a little bit about, just you before crypto and then kind of what led you to getting into it whenever that date is.
Sure. I've always been interested in technology and playing around with it. And I was on the cypherpunks list for, long time. I saw Satoshi's post, but I didn't really, I was busy with other life stuff. Thought it was interesting, but I didn't really pay much mind until, I think I became really interested in 2012, 2013. And then I finally decided to jump in right around the time that Doge coin was born. And so that was my intro into was crypto, was thinking I had missed out on all the mining on Bitcoin. And so I built a Franken miner and was mining Dogecoin on day one.
That's why you have an affinity for Dogecoin and supporting DogeParty.
Yeah, I came through to Counterparty through a fork of Counterparty. It's a weird path, but yeah, that's where my affinity for DogeParty comes from.
And so when you entered the crypto space, coming through Doge is interesting because most come for either the memes or just more of a fun and loving community. Or on the opposite end, when you come in for Bitcoin, as you mentioned, you were on the cypherpunk list, which I'm gonna have to ask you about again here in a second. You have this preference for decentralization, right? Fight against the man, rah kind of idea. So what side of the fence did you sit on when you entered the space?
I have always been kind of just a guy who wants to play around with technology, and so I just saw it as a new kind of a global database to play around with. I didn't really buy into the ideology of Bitcoin maxis until I really started playing around with the technology and seeing how it worked and seeing how other people are using it. And so yeah, I've kind of always been a BTC maxi, but I'm also, there's plenty of, we're all just playing around and experimenting. So to say this is the right way to do things and the only way to do things and everybody else can just F off is a silly way to do things.
Yeah. I was just actually recording with Mike in Space yesterday, and he was talking about similar ideology where he came in as the idea of to toy around with technology. And then during the bear market, right, the culture kind of shifted to this maximalism, and then he went to go experiment on some other things, and then actually came back as like, Bitcoin being a more pure technology. And of course, everyone has a different preference for decentralization. And when I came in 2016, I came through Ethereum, but I ended up being more of a believer in Bitcoin because of this idea of like cypherpunk movements, and you can really get wrapped up in it. But I've never met anyone who was on this cipher, this legendary cypherpunk list that received this Satoshi Nakamoto white paper for Bitcoin. How'd you end up on something like that? And was there much to it? Like, what kind of information comes flowing through that legendary list?
Yeah, I've been on it for a long time. Going back to like early BBS days. It was too high volume for me to monitor everything that was going on. So it's not like when I say, yes, I was on the list and Satoshi's thing came across, it wasn't like I was reading every post like, oh my God. It came through and I didn't really pay much attention to it until later on. And yes, I saw it at the time, but I didn't really dig into it. But yeah, it's just a list of kind of technology anarchists that are like, hey, we want to play with this, and some want to burn the system down, some want to improve the system, and so it's kind of just a mad list of throwing around ideas about how to do all of that.
Yeah, quite interesting. It's almost like the spam list where you just like exit out and you're like, all right, this is all now going to spam because I can't even keep up with any of this stuff.
Yeah, I will mention a real interesting side note. I don't want to go too much into my history, but one of the reasons I was on the cypherpunks list was because I was a pretty early spammer. Real Networks was one of the first companies to send out bulk emails, and I was the guy inside their company writing the code to send out bulk emails. So I was monitoring the email, the cypherpunks list primarily because Hashcash came out, and there was like talk about, there's basically ways to filter the spam. And so I was kind of doing it to monitor what the other side was doing, the kind of cat and mouse stuff.
Oh, and so, the cat and mouse game only gets exacerbated in crypto to just levels of wealth that people can attain through some of these hacks is quite wild, not monitoring just the spam filter. But moving back to, you came through Dogecoin. Of course, Counterparty was in 2014. What type of experimenting did you do when you first came into it outside of the setting up a mining rig?
Well, at first it was just mining, and there wasn't really anything you could do. Like profit was the only thing you really could do. But then I had millions of Dogecoin but I couldn't do anything with it. And then these guys came out and said, hey, there's this new thing called DogeParty, and you can create tokens on it. You can register words. And I used to be kind of a domainer too. So I instantly saw the connection and was like, whoa, I can register words, pay a one-time fee, own it forever, and maybe eventually sell it at some point in the future. So I can come in and buy JP Morgan Chase and all these names for super cheap and hold on to them for people in the future. So that was my first kind of non-mining experience. This is why I fully piled into it. It's like, this is a way I can play with the technology. It was just released. And we can kind of play around with tokens and what can we do on blockchains other than just this has value, send it back and forth.
Wow. Do you still hold a lot of those tokens this day?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I registered, and that's one of the reasons why I rebooted DogeParty. Because it died, I'll run you through a real quick history of DogeParty. So DogeParty was born, I became interested in it, registered a whole bunch of assets on vacation. I remember I was on vacation, like manually registering like swear words and like as fast as I could because I didn't have scripts and stuff to do this like I do now. But so DogeParty was born and I fully piled into it, but there was no way to view what was going on. So I built a block explorer which was dogepartychain.info or something like that, to allow people, kind of like XCHAIN. It was a very early version of XCHAIN, just to see what's going on, who registered what, who's sending what back and forth. And so that's kind of was the birth of XCHAIN and my entry into the party ecosystem.
The party ecosystem. Yeah, there is a Mono party that doesn't get as much love, which is the fork that lives on Monocoin. It's quite funny.
Yeah.
Have you ever explored that one?
I have not, but they are good. They're a good fork. They always, anytime there's something they find or an improvement, they submit bug reports to us and pull requests. So they're doing forking exactly right. They're not taking the code and saying, we're doing our own thing. They're doing that. But then when they find improvements or suggestions or way that's bugs in our code, it helps improve Counterparty, which is the whole point of forking these off to multiple chains, is play around in different ways and then get all the improvements back into Big Brother chain.
Yeah, we'll dive into the technicals of Counterparty here in a second. So then where was your entrance into, we'll say, either spells or rare Pepes? Because your name is generally referenced a lot when it comes to a lot of the early pioneers, especially with the devs. I believe it was you and John, I believe, were like the devs at the time or something like that, right?
Yeah. So I'll finish the journey through. So there was DogeParty, it got exciting. I built some stuff to view it, and then the platform died because they did a burn and nobody had any funds to maintain wallets and stuff. So pretty quickly it became clear the platform was going to die. So I stopped running the Block Explorer and then decided, okay, that platform is going to go away. Where can I still continue to do this stuff? And then I discovered Counterparty and whatnot, and fully went into Counterparty. As far as when I became involved, it was about 6 to 9 months after it launched. So I can't speak to all of the really early history, but I was there way before Rare Pepe.
Pretty much.
Yeah, before Joe, before, a lot of people. And kind of worked with the founders. I was on the Counterparty Foundation for a while, got elected by the community to kind of try to help run things there. And then, Counterparty's tried many, many different ways to like see success, but because it doesn't have marketing and funding, can't get in front of people. And so the community is a hardcore group, but it doesn't really get a ton of developers working on it. So to answer your question, yes, it got down to pretty bare bones where it was just John and I really don't work. I don't know Python. I can code on it a little bit, but I don't really work on the code base that much. I understand it. And so John and I kind of paired up, and he would be the technical genius that would come up with ideas and integrate everything, and I'd just be kind of the guy who would explain it in more layman's terms to people.
To people like me.
Yeah.
So was there anything about the technology at the time that caught your attention, or is it simply just because there wasn't anything else there that you're like, I need to just put my energy and my dev skills to work, and this has a community and it's something that you can do with Bitcoin, which isn't much, but there's something there?
Yeah, it was just a continuation of experimenting and playing around with what we could do with tokens on a blockchain, and it was just on a little bit more of an expensive chain. I will say something that maybe you can dive off into a little bit later, but it is disappointing to still see the mindset of core devs, which is you're using Bitcoin wrong, you're not, this is the correct way to do things. Because I thought we had this battle years ago and during the op return wars, where the Counterparty founders kind of battled with core devs. And I thought that they kind of got it, that we can do what we want on the blockchain. Let's all just work together. And this was kind of the birth of Ethereum, I think, too, was Vitalik saw Counterparty can't really continue on like this. If I want to experiment and go big, I got to go over and create my own chain.
Yeah, we are seeing this continually happen, but now more so found its way to Bitcoin, back to Bitcoin, but in the form of ordinals and now BRC20, right? And if any of these are, it seems like ordinals are here to stay. Is BRC20 here to stay? There's a lot of speculation. I think there's something that will come from it, but again, it seems like the best use case is speculation at this point in time. What are your thoughts on it? And then we'll come back to Counterparty and stuff afterwards. But curious, what are your thoughts of ordinals, BRC20, and stamps even in this kind of whole, I guess, new renaissance on Bitcoin of bringing even most smooth brain people like myself over to experiment in something, and kind of glossing over Counterparty?
I think any experimentation and playing around with technology is good regardless of where it happens. I honestly have been frustrated that all of this cool experimentation that could have been happening on Bitcoin has been happening on Ethereum. And for a couple of years, I was pretty jaded about that, pretty anti-Ethereum. But as time has gone on, I see that there clearly is a lot of value there. It's a digital playground that you can, and there's lots of fun stuff you can do over there. but the mantras of over there and Bitcoin are entirely different. From my perspective, Ethereum is all about profit and chasing pump, not necessarily saying it's all scams, but a huge portion of things over there are pump and dump, chase profits. And now that mindset is coming over here to Bitcoin. And so it's to get into a short answer to your question. I think it's great that developers from Ethereum are coming over and playing on Bitcoin and pushing the core developers to say, hey, this isn't just for store of value. Once again, we're going to use the blockchain however you guys define the rules, but you can't stop us from playing around. And I do wish they wouldn't, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot with stomping on the gas so much, but I think that's kind of BRC and not Ordinals. Ordinals kind of came in, minted stuff to the chain, created some controversy, but at least they didn't stop things entirely from working. Yeah. Then I think of the BRC stuff that fully enabled the Ethereum pump and dump, screw everybody else to pump, get my transaction mined first. That's what we've been seeing in the problems with the mempool and whatnot. Is just, it's not directly BRC's fault. Again, it's just a dude playing around like, hey, here's an idea. And he even said like, hey, this is pretty inefficient. It's probably going to be worth nothing, but here you go. But there's so much hype that everybody just jumps, oh my God, I can earn something on this. And
yeah, I went in, I think it's been about a week now, maybe 10 days. I launched a Jake token just to kind of learn what it was like going through that kind of experience as somebody who's not a dev, but works for a technology company. It's important to kind of like go through that process. Launched it, sold out in about four hours. And I kid you not, within 4 hours from that, I got people messaging me saying like, don't go to bed, pump your token. And I was like, oh God, it's the hardcore speculators. But Adam McBride and I, we had talked about for a while, when we were watching BRC20, was this idea that, right now it's all meme coins. It seems like speculation tends to bring in capital, brings in interest. Of course, it brings in a lot of degens too, but generally something solid will kind of like stem from that. And even when you think retroactively about Counterparty in its early days, from what people have told me in the conversations I've had, most people thought of Counterparty as something for like DeFi products or like financial products. And it ended up being NFTs, right?
Yeah, that's how it was pitched at the beginning. It was like, hey, this is the new stock market it's a financial platform. That's how it was pitched by the founders. But it's a system to create tokens. You can use it for whatever you want.
Right. And then it became the use for NFTs. And it's kind of similar with Ethereum. You created smart contracts. The speculation ended up being the giant ICO bubble, which was nothing, just vaporware and white papers. And then ultimately turned into again, NFTs. It turned into DeFi products, maybe some metaverse things that stem from it. So it's really hard to know. But if you're putting your dev cap on and you're looking at this clogged mempool of like 500 sats per VByte, like what is the solution to that long term if this kind of like gas war continues or even accelerates?
The core devs won't allow it. I mean, they're gonna, and I'm against rules that stop experimentation, but at the same time, the mempool being so clogged is eventually we're going to get to this level where you got to pay these fees. I agree, we're going to get there, but you can't just jack these fees up to this level and expect to just say this is the new norm. This is what people are going to be paying and sell it to people. Because I'm used to paying 28 cents to sell my send a couple hundred rare Pepe cards around. So when I'm having to pay $15, I realize that's where we're going eventually, but one project sucking all the air out of the space and stifling innovation and not allowing people to experiment is not good for the ecosystem at all. And I think the core devs are going to put a stop to it by removing the taproot discount or somehow stopping ordinals.
Yeah. So
restricting non-standard transactions.
Yeah. They'll restrict it to like, stopping BRC20 or even the whole ecosystem at a time. So what's the solution then if the core devs can't come to a solution? Because this does happen sometimes. Is it L2s like stacks, or is it a side chain kind of like Rootstock and some of these other experiments? Or is there something else that really hasn't been implemented yet or even tried that might be the ultimate solution for it?
Well, I think if we know long-term that level one is just going to keep getting more and more expensive, not everybody's going to want to pay on level one. Level one is just going to become a settlement layer. So we have to focus on level 2 solutions, like Lightning Network. And I'm sure that there's, something that could be done with counterparty tokens on layer 2. But again, we don't have tons of dev resources and whatnot. So we don't have time to experiment and play. We're just kind of maintaining everything and trying to keep it running.
Yeah, I mean, you've learned this firsthand as being pretty much you're the sole contributor to XCHAIN at the moment, from my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I'll take you through that journey real quick too. I arrived on Counterparty. I was like, okay, I'm here. I'm going to be in this space for a while. When I arrived at Counterparty, I wrote some scripts to bulk register assets pretty quick. So I bulk registered like 10, 15,000 asset names pretty quick, and then was like, okay, now I'm invested in the space. How do I build this space out? So first thing was build out a block explorer again, and then build out a site, coindaddy.io, which was just a way for me to say, hey, here's the assets that I have. You can make an offer to buy them from me. But the only way to interface with Counterparty was Counterwallet, which is horrible. I mean, it works for the time. It still works. It's a great product in that it was written 10 years ago and it still humps along like now, but the UI is horrible and it's not the wallet I wanted to use. So I said, I'm going to write my own wallet. I'm going to write the wallet I want to use. But before I could do that, the only way you can make requests to Counterparty right now is like custom JSON post requests to get, and that's not very easy. Like everything needs to be accessible at a URL. So I wrote Counterparty to MySQL to suck data from Counterparty's database into a optimized MySQL database. And then I built a blockchain XChain on top of that. And then I built APIs in XChain with the explicit purpose of, I know I want to build this wallet, but before I build this wallet, I have to have APIs I can call on. And before I have the APIs I can call on, I have to have stuff optimized in a database way more efficiently than Counterparty stores it, so that I can do millions of calls instead of, whatever. So yes, I built XChain so that I could build FreeWallet, so that I could have a wallet to hold my NFTs and look at and use the way I wanted.
Wow. So just to make sure we have this straight. So you built coindaddy.io, right? Is that what you said, mentioned, which was kind of the precursor to XChain. Then you built XChain, which is what everyone uses now. It's the block explorer. It holds dispensers. It has a DEX on it. It has your buys and sells and transfers. And then FreeWallet, which is the wallet provider that's kind of the de facto counterparty wallet that I believe everybody uses. I don't even know if there is a competitor, because I don't think I've ever used anything outside of FreeWallet.
Unfortunately, the space had a whole bunch of wallets like early on. But as time's gone on and, people have been like, money's over on Ethereum projects have, kind of migrated away, and wallets have kind of dropped off to where FreeWallet and Counterwallet are the only ones really left kind of running.
FreeWallet's great, and there was a great upgrade recently, I have to say. So good job to that. Dive into a little bit of details, and then I'm gonna pull up CoinDaddy here too in a second. Give us some details of like building that first product for DogeParty and for Counterparty of CoinDaddy, and kind of like the history behind it.
Well, I come from like a web developer, server admin, database administrator kind of experience. And so once I kind of mentally bought into the platform, I started diving into the technicals of it and looking at how they store stuff in the database and, will I be able to make millions of requests to counter whatever. And I determined pretty quickly that the database works, but it's the minimum amount of work required to like keep things running, and it's not really optimized well. So I went and sucked all the data out of Counterparty and put it into MySQL. Sorry, your screen share threw me off. I'll keep talking. I sucked all that data out, put it into a database, and then kind of indexed that data, because Counterparty, every single time a transaction happens or somebody sends from an address to an address, it stores that address and that transaction in multiple places, multiple tables, and multiple places in the database. Basically bloats the database. And the most efficient way to store data is just one time. And so I just went through and created indexes of every transaction, every address, every anything that I could create an index for. Just optimize the database to make it faster. And then wrote XCHAIN on top of that, and
yeah. So CoinDaddy now I know is not used as much. I know some people in the DogeParty community.
I created the company, and then I just got. This is the problem. I never really figured out how to make profit in this space. It just there's a new technology. I'm gonna go play with that. Oh wait, this one. So yes, I created CoinDaddy like years and years ago, and there were services I wrote. There's a function on Counterparty now called dispensers, which is essentially vending machines. And a few of us were playing with this technology early on. Tokenly, another company that was into Counterparty early on, played with the technology as well. They created these vending machines. Were a little bit different, where you could put tokens in them and use the tokens to buy other tokens. So very, very similar to kind of what you see with Ethereum, where you can stack one bot to another and stack to be like, I want to put Bitcoin in or put Ethereum in and get Pepe out, and it'll figure out the most optimal route. So anyway, all that is to say, yes, this site existed, and I played with technology on this site when this was the only place to play with it, but now it's kind of moved elsewhere, so I haven't really updated this site in a while. All that this does right now is allows people who don't want to have to go through the pain of registering XCP to just come to the site, say, I want to register Jimmy Joe and pay $5 in Bitcoin plus transaction fees. And I register it for you and then transfer it to your Counterparty wallet. So it just makes getting started a little bit easier.
Yeah, creating a counterparty token's, not gonna lie, a little bit of a pain in the ass. If you're not familiar with how it works, it's funny because those who come from Ethereum or just not familiar with counterparty or Bitcoin in general, I should actually say, you go onto Bitcoin and it feels like you're almost in a time warp. It feels like you're like going back to like Windows 98 back in the day, right? Maybe it's because
some of us love that though. Some of us like, yes, keep it BBS.
the simplistic version of it, right? It has a hardcore kind of nostalgic feel to it. But so then you went on and you created XChain, and XChain is the de facto. It's a de facto Explorer times everything else that you see here. Dispensers, it shows the issuance, market dynamics, right? It shows all the network information. And
yeah, it's just a way to like visualize all the data in the Counterparty database. And so when something happens, you can be like, okay, an hour ago, this happened.
How long did it take to build XChain? And I believe from my research, I did a history of NFT marketplace. XChain came online, I believe, around 2017. Does that sound correct?
Sure. I work on so much stuff, I have no idea. If whatever Wayback Machine says is yeah. And then DogePartyChain.info, I think, was the explorer that if you want to dig in Wayback Machine, not now, but then you'll see that it's very, very similar. Just kind of tabs that show the different actions on Counterparty and then a list of those actions.
Interesting. So how long did it take you to build something like this? And also, how does it feel managing something so important for the infrastructure when it's just you? Does that get stressful?
First, that's a whole separate topic. But yeah, it took me probably a week to understand Counterparty and realize, and to figure out, okay, this is how I need to optimize it, and to create the databases and to write Counterparty to MySQL, the script that basically I run every block to take data from Counterparty and put it into the database. Writing the front end interface. Most of it was kind of done with DogeParty assets or whatever that thing I wrote was. And so it was mostly just a copy paste job. And then a week. I mean, it's been over the years, there's been constant updates and improvements, and then people are like, hey, now we can put images on. Okay, cool. Now I'll update the Explorer to do images and stuff. But as far as the core guts of it, probably about a week.
Wow. Okay. That's much quicker than I had anticipated or believed. So then I guess on the other side, how is it from the dev side of supporting something like this? What first, just tell us kind of the day in, maybe day out, maybe the light version of it, of what does somebody like JDOG do when it comes to managing such an important piece of infrastructure for a community on Bitcoin?
right now, the day in, day out is just wake up and see what fires there are and try to guide it, like see what's going on with SRC and be like, whoa, in a week, some bad shit's gonna happen. We need to fix this before everybody else jumps onto this like BRC. So yeah, my day to day right now, and for the past 2 months, ever since ordinals and stamps and whatnot, has just basically been waking up, trying to do a quick digest of the new technology that has been spawned in that day and how it does or does not relate to Counterparty. Answering, probably 15, 20 DMs from like core Counterparty people that I check in with, and then just bouncing between the rooms to kind of answer messages. And then I try to close my Telegram and Twitter and anything that's going to be distracting, and just focus on coding. It's the only way I can now. I need to shut out the outside world entirely, and just people have been waiting 3 weeks on this FreeWallet update, and I'm going, Twitter, this, that. I gotta put this out. So let me get to your question of how does it feel on a day-to-day, because you're hitting me at a really interesting time, because I'm shifting from this being a hobby to my full-time job now, and you're also hitting me right after it's gone from like having my arms around the space to putting out fires every day and having lots of not need, but demand for my time in many different places and trying to figure out where is my time best spent. So anyway, I got involved in Counterparty, was around for a long time, was on the, helping out however I could, but eventually the founders went away, the foundation went away. When the founders went away and the last one stepped away, they handed me the keys. The keys are essentially just a GitHub repo access so that I can make commits, which even I don't do. I only want technical people to do. So only John and Javier do the commits. And then they handed over the keys to the website to me and the whatever. I was already running pretty much everything anyway, so it made sense. But that put a lot, at the time it just made sense, but it put a lot more pressure on me. And I thought I was helping out the ecosystem, and I am, but it was also, this was the first time it was popping up as like, hey, JDOG's a bad guy. JDOG is trying to take control of Counterparty, and kind of like the Bitcoin core devs are saying, telling us how to use it, which is not, from my perspective, that's not the case at all. I'm just trying to keep this thing running and support experimentation. So that was the first time I kind of experienced like, oh, okay, this holding the keys and kind of running everything, even though I don't feel I control everything and it's a community project. Perception is kind of important to manage here because I'm not the bad guy. So that introduced me to a little bit of stress, but no big deal. I can deal with it. Over the years, there's been people that have come into Counterparty and said, you're doing stuff wrong, or screamed and stormed off, or whatever. And I think it is great to have different opinions, and I don't think my opinion is the right one. There are many times where I've said this, I think I have the best opinion, and people like Joe Looney come in and say, you're right, but check this out. This is how we really should do it. And I'm open to hearing any ideas. But at the end of the day, somebody kind of has to steer the ship and say, okay, we're going from idea phase to these are the 4 good ideas. This is going to be boiled down into this improvement. So that's kind of what my last few years have been. And I still just now, which is work on Counterparty full time. But I still would have to drop everything and whatnot if I got a message and whatnot. So about 2 years ago, right around the time, let me rewind. It was just down to John and I for a few years. John's a genius. I miss him a bunch. And we were working on a whole bunch of improvements and decided, okay, we're tired of waiting around for Counterparty. We're getting this on exchanges. You and me, we're going to take this thing forward. And I got about 6 months into that, got exchange listings for Counterparty, started getting listings and stuff for it. And then John passed. And that was a really tough time for me because he was a really, I don't really have a ton of tight friends that really I understand me and I understand them on a core level. And he was one of those. We talked every day for 5+ years. So anyway, I won't go off on a John tirade, but I miss him. And so when he died, it was no longer John and I. It was me, and I freaked out for a while because I didn't have the genius to like tickle the code. But luckily, John's brother, Javier, who's also been involved in Counterparty for a long time, I just had not interacted with him because I was only interacting with John. Javier stepped up, and so we went and made me feel more confident. We kept maintaining the code, and then about a year and a half ago, about a year and a half ago, I decided, okay, I want to do this full time. I don't want to have to do a normal job. So I stuck my hand out to the Counterparty community and said, I want to quit. I want to do this full time. And it was
consider subjective. Yes, very. 100% on chain means that
that was great, but then Bitcoin crashed. And so 3 years funding became 1 year funding. And so yeah, that's been a stress for the past whatever. Like, oh my God, now I don't have a runway. How do we get funding into this? And funding for Counterparty has always been a problem. Anyway, I feel like I'm rambling, so I will let you direct the conversation to which topics you.
No, this was that was fantastic. It's sometimes it's hard to express some emotion online when everyone is just literally monkey pictures and frogs and pixelated images. So to to be able to humanize individuals who are the ones that are operating the screens and operating the infrastructure is very important. So would you say then, and maybe this is like a little bit more of even a personal question, is John's death what keeps you motivated to build something like this? Or do you draw inspiration from other things as well? Because it sounds like, if you're not familiar with Counterparty at all and you're just a listener to the show, I'd be like, why is this guy even doing this? Like, it sounds stressful. So what keeps you going to operate all of these? And mostly now it seems like it's just FreeWallet and XCHAIN, but to keep going, what motivates you?
I want to keep a playground on Bitcoin for tokens. And it's important to me. Like, I understand a whole bunch of new fancy stuff can be done on Ethereum, but it's, to me, the decentralization portion is really the core component of Bitcoin and why I stay involved. And so it's really important to me to have a token platform on a truly decentralized system like Bitcoin. So would I be doing this if John, I'm doing it without John. It's more difficult, but I mentally committed to this long time ago, before John even came in and said like, wow, Counterparty is amazing. And we partnered up. It was much easier with John, but it's, I still believe just because my good friend is gone doesn't mean it shakes my faith in the system or my beliefs. So I'm here to stay. It is difficult though at times. Yeah.
We've all gone through those really hard times. Losing somebody really resets your thoughts, and sometimes it's hard to ever even recover from that. So when you decided to move into this full time, you had that funding. Have you added any of your monetization mechanisms so that you're fully funded, or at least somewhat funded, to continue on to this? Because I don't think there is a platform fee. Maybe there is now, but I don't believe there is, correct?
Yeah, let me run you through Counterparty funding, because the history of that, because it's also an interesting journey. Counterparty was born in a really fascinating way. Like, people essentially took their Bitcoin and sent it to an unspendable address and destroyed them, which is a really fair way to do things. But it also means you destroyed all that money and there's no funds for things. So a problem from the very beginning has been, funding, and how do we get funding in? Counterparty tried to get funding in through, Counterparty Foundation, various things, but no matter what they've really tried, no funding, consistent funding has flowed in. And me personally as a project, I've tried various ways to get funding from the Counterparty community. When I wrote FreeWallet, I was like, all right, I'm gonna put the wallet out there with the base features, but I need to earn something to maintain this infrastructure. So let me hide the exchange behind a paywall. And if you buy, you spend $10 to buy a FreeWallet, then you can view this exchange. And even though basically I removed it because nobody was paying, and I knew the power of this exchange. Like, if people see this, they're gonna be like, holy crap, like, this is amazing. So it felt greedy for me to hide that behind a paywall. And so I removed that another way for me to earn money, or not for me to fund Counterparty. So personally, for funding my own development, I've never been able to bring in funding consistently. It was an amazing blessing that Counterparty community came together and gave me that 10 Bitcoin to fund me up until a couple of months ago. But we're at a point now where it costs thousands of dollars each month to maintain this stuff. And so I finally, this last FreeWallet release, I still feel conflicted about it, but I put it in an automatic donation system, which essentially just, if you use the wallet, and I did everything I could to draw attention to it, to make you aware of it. I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to scam funds or whatever. But essentially I have an auto donation system that is enabled automatically. So when you use FreeWallet now, starting a week ago or whatever, you can, every transaction pays like, I think 10, 15, 20 cents to whatever you configure it to support development. And you can turn it off. You can tune how much you want to send. You can choose which cause you want to send to. So it's not about trying to put it in my pocket. It's about trying to get consistent funding into Counterparty from the users who are using Counterparty. And I felt it was important to get it out now because I think we're going to see a lot more influx of users to Counterparty. And if those new users can just, throw a couple of cents towards funding, we're off to the races. Now we have funding for things other than just bug fixes and little code improvements.
Yeah, then you get to scale, right? You get to upgrade from Windows 98 to Windows XP at some point in time from the user interface.
Hopefully then we have funds to be like, oh yeah, well, we know the community wants wallets. Nobody wants to build them. Well, if we have funds coming in, we're like, okay, hey, we have 20 grand, build top, have a hackathon contest. Community gets 5 wallets, the best one wins money, everybody wins.
Speaking of wallets, FreeWallet, you mentioned this is where the funding's coming from. Awesome upgrade, by the way. Do you spend more time now running FreeWallet, or is it maintenance of XCHAIN?
So it's kind of a mix of everything. I work on Counterparty code base every day with Javier, and we discuss, these improvements, and then, I kind of guide Javier, like, this is what I would like you to work on for the improvements. We also work on the same thing for DogeParty. So I run the base layer for Counterparty and DogeParty, the Explorers, XChain, and for DogeParty and whatever, and the wallet. So there's FreeWallet, and then there's DogeWallet, which is a fork of that. And so it's spending a lot of my time making updates in the most efficient way. Like, it's important for me to get an update into FreeWallet because that's the largest community. But all of those updates now, the DogeParty community are going to want them. So now I'm going to have to spend time forking those code updates over too. So I really just pay attention to I shouldn't say this because it's going to make people scream louder, but I just pay attention to the community that is screaming loudest and where I see the most need. Like, okay, you're right. I'll put down what's fun to work on and work on what's needed.
well, if you're just abstracting both communities against each other, Bitcoin community or the Dogecoin community, I can tell you without even needing to know which one is yelling the loudest.
Oh yeah, for sure. Nobody's really paying attention to DogeParty right now, but it's a great, if you want to play around with Counterparty and what you can do with it, that's heads up. That's where we're going to be pushing out the brand new cutting edge features. We're not going to risk Counterparty with like experimental stuff. Anything that is brand new and big, it's going to be put on a DogeParty where it's faster blocks and cheaper so that people can play around and experiment with it before we get it over to Counterparty.
That was the similar philosophy when it came to Litecoin and Bitcoin for a while. Still kind of happening too with some of the technologies that are on there with like inscriptions and stuff like that. It's quite interesting. But one of the new technologies that has popped up recently that utilizes Counterparty and DogeParty is stamps, and something you had to adapt to. And when I was scrolling through the XChain when you were talking earlier, you can see all the A with a bunch of new numbers afterwards. Those are all the stamps. How tough was it from a dev standpoint to first figure this out when it popped up, and then to implement it? And then kind of like what are your thoughts about that? Is it a good use case for Counterparty to maybe bring over some new attention?
integration for me was well, I'll take you on my journey with stamps. Mike messaged me and was like, "Hey, we're doing this thing. We've already, we came up with this new format. We're stamping images." And I was like, "Oh, is this weird thing I'm seeing going on that I don't?" Because I watch XCHAIN. I'm like, "Well, I see something's going on here. What's going on?" He's like, "Yeah, that's what's going on, all this stamp stuff. Could you support it on XCHAIN?" I was like, "Okay, well, it's no big deal. I mean, if it's just the image like right there, base 64, it's no big deal to do, like encode it and display it." So like within a couple hours, we had XCHAIN support up. And then my views on stamps is that they're awesome. Like I have mixed feelings on them. I think that technology wise or excitement wise and like competing and keeping Counterparty and the functionality of Counterparty, keeping up with like the hype train of ordinals and what's going on there, it's great because it at least keeps us in the conversation. As far as integrating it, there was nothing we had to do to Counterparty at all to support stamps. It was just, we've had numeric assets, we've had multi-sig. So they were already doing it. They just kind of let me know what they were doing so I could decode it and let other people know what they were doing. Yes, they use numeric assets. I have mixed feelings on numeric assets. I personally don't like them.
Why is that?
Because they're ugly. Who wants to see A blah, 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 blah. Nah, we have this beautiful name system. I can get JDOG and rare Pepe.shoes. We have this. So initially we had a named system and then these funky whatever. And I understand the purpose for them. The purpose for them to exist was because people say Counterparty is a crap platform because you have to use XCP. It's a shitcoin, so they discredit it entirely. And so the developer said, well, technically you don't have to. So we'll allow a way for you to create an asset, a numeric thing in our system where you can do it just using Bitcoin. And so that's why Mike is using and Stamps started using that method, is because it allows people to immediately only use Bitcoin, bypass using XCP and use the Counterparty system. So that is great in that it anchors this new Stamps to Counterparty. I'm not a fan of numerics, primarily because I don't like scrolling down in my wallet to like pass all these numerics.
And you want it to look pretty. You want it to look pretty and nice.
Yeah, well, I just put out an update to I realize I'm biased, so I'm like, well, what's my core thing? I don't like seeing them on my wallet, so I put out an update on the latest FreeWallet release, so I can just click a button and be like, hide these stamps from. So they're not as big of a deal to me. But the way that Bitcoin Stamps is using Counterparty is interesting because they're stamping whole images into the token itself, which technically we've had that ability, but nobody's really
explored it,
came up with the use case yet for it. So I think it's great, the experimentation, and who cares if they're doing it on a numeric way that I'm not a fan of. That's what it's for, is for like playing around and experimenting. However, I think it's important if the goal of stamps and whatnot is to keep Counterparty and whatnot in the conversation, that we be able to like onboard some people to actually using Counterparty and like not just have the narrow view of like, the Counterparty only has these A whatever stamps. So at least have a conversation, be like, hey, it also has these named stamps, and yes, you can stamp to these named things as well.
So Counterparty's been around for 9 years, January 2014, I believe, when the op return came out. It's had a few kind of bursts of users flow into it from a variety of different mechanisms, but still largely kind of overlooked. Why do you think that is? Why do you think Counterparty really hasn't had its quote unquote glory moment, kind of like what you see happening now with Ordinals or BRC20, or maybe was that glory moment the Pepes and those early technologies back then?
I think we don't get our glory moments because we're not able to participate in the conversation, because the conversation is so polluted with either pump or paid articles and whatnot. And we're just over here doing our thing, our honest thing over here, creating tokens on platforms. We don't have money to like do paid articles and whatnot. So A, we're not participating in the conversation, so we get overlooked. And B, people are really quick to be like, oh, well, Counterparty is old and you have to use a shitcoin to use it. So if it would have been anything worth value, it would have already taken off. So let's just discredit it entirely. And so I feel like now we don't really even get a chance. Like everybody just like, oh, this is the new thing, pile on the new ordinals thing. And nobody, even when dev focus is on Bitcoin, nobody's still going down the rabbit hole and being like, wow, well, look at XChain, look at all these. You can already do all this stuff that we're trying to recreate on Counterparty. Maybe not in the exact same way as we're used to in Ethereum, but if we're building a whole new system anyway, why don't we take the system that already we have and like improve upon it, and rather than start from scratch and build square wheels?
Yeah, this space takes the philosophy of, if it's not my Ponzi, I don't want it, right? Or if it's not the newest Ponzi that I can participate in,
Yeah,
then, right. Even if it's not a Ponzi or not, but that's kind of the thoughts behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you like then to see happen to Counterparty over the near to medium term? Is it just something as simple as like a UI UX update? Is it something as simple as a new flow of users? Maybe a new type of experimentation? As somebody who's kind of the puppeteer or the puppet master, that's to say, behind it, like what would you like to see?
I would like to see more developers, not necessarily working on the core protocol. Like we've had the core features for many, many years, but there's so much more that can be done. For instance, one of the core complaints that I hear about Counterparty is it's not easy to use. It doesn't have a MetaMask. Like it needs to be easy to just make a click. We have all that functionality. Joe Looney built out MetaMask before MetaMask did. He had a Chrome extension that you could click. It pulled from XChain to show you your balances. We could click a button and throw unsigned transactions to that. It's the exact same thing as MetaMask, but nobody liked it. And so it went away. So a lot of this technology that people are asking for and saying, this is what we need, it already has been done and exists, but there's only so many devs in the space, and we're all, holding different projects. So it's more devs will make the space stronger and more experimentation will go on.
Yeah, a Web3 or a web extension wallet is probably a huge low-hanging fruit, but big priority. Everyone's really familiar with that. And if you can add that in, then it'd be pretty good. Or even just have Counterparty integrated into some of these larger wallets like Xverse or things like that. Mm-hmm. Xverse, Hero, some of those wallets that are being used. It'd be key. It seems like it's coming around. I saw Stamps was integrated into, or had support added in Hero Wallet, and I believe they're trying to do the same thing for Ordinal's Wallet and a few of these other Ordinal Xverse. So if you see that, then maybe you'll see some other big outflows. Are there any other types of low-hanging